Welcome everyone, and thank you for being here at the House of Sound. I'm personally very excited to have everyone here. I had the chance to watch the movie over the weekend, and knowing what was coming, I have so many questions for you. And that's why I have multiple pieces of paper. I wrote some question, and then we send me some question. I'm gonna have to choose on the go with you. But tonight, really, we're celebrating an often, unsung hero of movies, sound. I think the images and the pictures of movies are always bringing strong moments in what we watch. But really, it's sound that can carry the emotions of such movie. Especially this one, again, with the opportunity of watching it over the weekend, you will see the emotion coming through with your work. And tonight we're also celebrating, of course, Todd Maitland, 6-time nominee for Oscars, and congratulations on such a movie.
Thank you.
And best of luck.
Yes, let's hope for the sixth one.
Exactly.
Lucky number 6.
Oh, yeah, exactly. As we dive into the conversation, of course, you can see that's a very intimate setting. Feel free to ask questions. We're lucky also to have one of my favorite Italian on earth right here, Roberto Gamba. Roberto actually built this room with Ricky about 2 years ago. Those guys are the technical mind of the company when it comes to home theater. So if you have any question about technical, please do not send them to me. Go to Rob or Ricky. So let's go. Todd, again, I had a lot of pleasure watching this movie, and the first part I wanted to ask you was really about the philosophy that you could share with us about what makes great sound in film.
Good question. I've done 16 music-based movies before, and one of the things that I've really focused on is trying to make great sound for music-based movies. So you remember back to like Singing in the Rain and that when they'd be talking and then all of a sudden they'd start singing and it'd sound like they were transported into some sort of magical sound booth, and everything sounded wonderful. So after doing the Doors or during doing the Doors, because on the Doors, Val Kilmer's actually sang live for probably 6 takes a day. His voice would last for about 6 takes and then he would be blown out. So he'd always do his close-ups first. But all the close-ups in that movie are him singing. So realizing that and then realizing the old school of the way they made music-based movies, I really tried to like figure out a lot of different ways to try to make them all sound more real. And that's like the real goal is to make it sound like you're not in a film anymore, to make it sound like you're really on screen.
And I guess on a complete unknown, that's probably the next chapter of this.
Complete Unknown is a whole other ballgame. I've never done anything like this. So on all music-based movies that I've done, the normal process is this. So you go in well before you start shooting, you go into a music studio, record all the instrumentals. Then you have professional singers sing the parts the way you want them. Then you start training the actors to sing those parts based upon those professional singers. And eventually the actors take over the vocal part. Then you go back in the studio before you start filming and you record the actors singing on that track. Then those tracks come to me. I'm the production mixer. So I'm the one who's on the set recording everything that happens in front of the camera. So we come to shooting it. I'll then give the actor a little earpiece. If it's a big dance number, you'll play it with speakers and you'll just blow it out with speakers because you're never going to use their live vocals while they're dancing. But if you're doing more intimate pieces, like on Across the Universe, we did a bunch of intimate things. West Side Story, those projects were all the intimate ones you try to record live. So you feed the actor the pre-recorded music and vocal in their ear, and then they sing along to themselves. So now in post-production, now you have 2 vocal tracks. You have my vocal track on set, which is the live one, and then you have the one from the pre-record. So now you have the option to go back and forth, either go to one or the other, or come back and forth in and out of them like they will on a lot of shows. On this film, Timmy decided we had been talking about it in rehearsals a lot that we were going to go live with most of this. And the whole concept when we actually started filming is that we were going to go live with most of it, but a bunch of the bigger ones were going to be to playback, meaning that Timmy would be getting an earpiece and singing to it, and I would be playing back music as low as I could, so that we can record Timmy as well as we could. But Timmy came to me 10 minutes before we did the first big scene that we're going to do, which was Carnegie Hall, and said, "I'm going live." And we never went back. We threw out all of those tracks. We never had one timing mechanism. We never had any earpieces, no playback for any of this entire movie. It was basically like recording an album, and a movie, at the same time. And then the different sounds for each of those, because there's a sound for the album and then there's a sound for the movie. So there's a lot of different levels of sound in this thing.
Amazing. One of the elements that I loved in the movie was noticing multiple pieces of technology from back in the days. When you look at the amplifier being used on stage, the microphone being used on stage during the performance, how did you incorporate all those different? First of all, how did you source those equipment? How did the team found all those different elements from different eras? But how did you mix that into the final product?
So that was really part of the whole goal, was to use those microphones from that time period. So it was a combination of our prop person, Michael Jointner, and Joshua Lutz, who owns a tremendous amount of vintage microphones. And so we picked 42 microphones from 1961 to 65 and used them in chronological order so that you would hear the little bit of difference of sound, as time was going on and from each different venue. So that was always a part of it. And then the technology, like you'll see it in the recording studio, and that they rebuilt the entire recording studio, and then we would make it look like it was working. So we would send audio signal for all the meters and get all the meters moving, properly with everything, because it wasn't really functional. But we made it work as functionally as possible with the communication back and forth. So in a normal recording studio, you have you have the engineer room, and then you have the live room, and the communication back and forth. So we'd create that communication so they can go back and forth, but we'd have everything coming into the main room to be able to play back on the main room, just to make it as real, again, just like a real environment.
Sure. And tonight, we, Macintosh and Sonus Faber, of course, it's a celebration of high-end audio on our end. This room is, I'm a little bit biased, but pretty good. um, I'm wondering, how does high-end audio equipment goes into your work? So of course, you're using certain specific products on camera, but when it comes into your work, how do you use those audio products? Which one do you pick? You talked earlier about those headphones that you were using. Can you share a little bit about your process?
Sure. So when I did West Side Story, I realized that I just had to build an entire new sound cart from the ground up. So since I'm the person that's on the set, we have to be mobile and all that. So when I did the doors, we had 8 carts of equipment. I was dragging around a 2-inch analog recorder with me, and like 16-track playback and 2 mixing panels. It was ridiculous. And now everything is wireless, So I when I was doing when I was setting up for West Side Story and realized that I needed to build a cart that was basically capable of recording a Broadway show on the streets of the city, and have 40 tracks of wireless, and be able to do all these mixes going out for different kinds of playback and all of that. It all came down to wireless, and I literally sat down and I did a whole, dog and pony show with every one of the big major companies that came through, and I picked Shure. The Shure Axion system to me was a lifesaver, and it worked so I've had it ever since, and it's worked so incredibly well, throughout the entire process. Everything's wireless, all the things that everything I look at my old sound carts, and there's a million cables coming and going, and now it's all just,
All of them. Huh? We when watching the movie, coming back on this idea of emotion, it's true that Timothée Chalamet during the entire movie, this live performance is what gives so much emotion to the character. You will go through it right now. I'm wondering, did that also, when you say that this is kind of a new way for you to approach this engineering of audio, does that also create a new opportunity to communicate the emotion on screen?
I think that he brought that, that's the reason why we were able to do all of this. I don't think you'll see this happen often, because it
Yeah.
takes somebody like Timmy, honestly, to be able to do something like this. It's that kind of commitment. I mean, he gave 5.5 years to learning this, You know, when he came into it, he was playing as good at, I mean, I thought we'd be replacing a whole lot of guitar and,
Uh-huh.
and voice and all of that. We replaced very little. Some harmonica for sure.
Wow, that's
But he was still pretty good with harmonica. I mean, you know, it really came down to the amount of work. I was telling people before that's like he would play even when he was off camera. Like if the other actors were being filmed and he was off camera, he'd still be out there playing just to keep that energy going on the set. It's yeah.
Nice.
It was really, you know, without someone like him, it would never have worked. And there was, you know, without a timing mechanism. I mean, he was within 1 or 2 beats, you know, a minute. I'd say take to take to take, you know, which would have been a disaster for, you know, for
Sure.
post production, trying to piece together these songs.
Wow. Impressive.
Yeah, very impressive.
Another impressive part in the movie is this 23 minutes live scene at the Newport Folk Festival. Is a continuous scene of a concert. What was the challenge for you recording this?
A lot.
The challenge is
Yeah.
exactly.
The whole thing. So basically, you'll see it here when we get to 1965 the night Newport, when he goes on stage. So there's a scene that starts with this Texas road gang. They're chopping logs. So it starts with them, and then it goes to MCs announcing Timmy coming, or you know, Bob coming out, and then his band comes out with the full band. They go back, then he comes back out acoustic. Then there's a whole other scene that goes on in the wings because there's all this chaos that's happening because he's going electric, and the people are freaking out, and particularly the people who run Newport are freaking out. So there's a whole other scene that's going on. So I have microphones out for obviously the ones for everything on stage, monitor mix for them on stage, speakers going out to all the audience, like 5 or 6 microphones out for audience microphones. Then all the actors are all wired also. Again, in that idea of just creating that different sound, because when you're singing through the microphone through a speaker, you should sound one way, but then when you turn and talk to your bandmate, you should sound entirely different. So we do that a lot. You'll see that in one scene with Joan Baez here when she's singing House of the Rising Sun, and she pushes the microphone away and goes to this a cappella piece. And then they talk, and then Bob gets introduced to her after that. So you have different sounds. You have the sounds through the system, you have this a cappella sound. And again, with Timmy, there's probably about 12 pieces where he sings that are not performance pieces, so he's not in front of a microphone. So the challenge was really to figure out how to mic him and make him sound really good and consistent throughout all of them. And I watched the rehearsals before we started filming, and the way he holds his guitar, he holds it the way Bob Dylan did, which is the body of it very high up on his body, where normally I would have a lavalier microphone here on him. I couldn't do it because the guitar covered it. So the only way I could do it was by putting a microphone in his hair, which was a huge conversation to get that done, and to get the hair department on board with it, because now they have to weave it in the morning, you know, and now they have to monitor it, you know, all day long, you know, and the wire kept sticking out in the back. I'm like, look, it's worth it. If you have to get rid of the wire, it's going to, you know, cost you $20 in CGI, you know, as to trying to replace these tracks. You'll never be able to replace these tracks. So everybody got on board. And you know, again, that's another like, you know, tapestry of the sound to this, where you have him, the way he sings, the way he sounds through this system. You'll hear it in the first thing that he sings when he sings in the hospital, and then the next couple little pieces like at Pete's Tavern and that, and then you'll hear it also when you go back into one of the events, the Gaslight, when he's singing Masters of War. That's another piece he's doing in front of an audience, but there's no microphone. So that's another one that's, when you hear it, just remember it's all done through this, through that, and a microphone and the guitar and a couple of ambient microphones. But
It was actually my next question. I was going to ask you. I know he's been mimicking the way Bob Dylan is playing, and I was curious about the way you need. How do you record that? But
I recorded just the way I would record. You know, I had a microphone in the guitar, and then the hair microphone. And the hair mic work great because if you think about it, it goes over his mouth, so you get a little more level from the mouth, and then you also get the guitar, and then I could add in from the guitar and the ambient microphones anything, you know, to make it, you know, to balance it out.
Gotcha.
And give you the feeling.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I have a personal question for me. Is your favorite scene of the movie? yourself, the one that you had the most pleasure of recording?
That's interesting. No one's ever asked me that before. It has to be that end scene, just because it was just like doing a live concert. It was like everything. It was as close to a live concert as a live concert can be.
Yeah,
So
good.
yeah, and when it works, it feels great.
Yeah.
When it doesn't work, it sucks. You bring it home with you. It's like for hours you're sitting with it. You're going, "Fuck, I could have done better on that." But when it works, it's really good.
I hope you will enjoy some of that magic you created in this room. We had the chance to host a few screenings, and I think our goal at Macintosh and Sony Cyber always been to transmit sound the purest way possible. And I hope you're going to enjoy this screening.
Oh yeah. So the one thing we talked about before is, so when I
Oh
mix, I
yeah,
can only use one set of headphones. They're old. They're called Beyer DT48s, and they're flat, flat, flat headphones, and they're old. And I have like 10 of them. I bought them before they discontinued them. And my father was a sound mixer, and he used them also, and that's what everybody used to use. But they are the flattest of flat sounds. So having recorded like 90% of the music on this,
uh-huh.
it'll be fascinating to hear the system.
Good. Do you have any question to share, Howard?
Well, I think we were talking before outside, and I had just some technical questions, but I was wondering, in addition to that, what's the next challenge for you? What have you not done that you would like to do that would be, exciting for you?
Interesting. I am actually going, so I teach at NYU. I'm head of sound at NYU grad school. And I really like doing that. I feel like film wise, there are a couple things, and you never know what's coming up. Like Scorsese's talking about doing a Sinatra movie. So, that would be fun. I would love to do that.
We need to host this one here.
Yeah, that would be a good one. That would be a good one for here. Um, so you really never know what's coming up. I never expected to do fall. I did that TV show Fallout for the first
Oh, there you
season,
go. Nice.
and that was fascinating. I'd never done anything in that genre before, and it was really great. So that's one of the great things about our business. You really kind of never know what's coming up. But I'm not going to take anything that is not really fascinating for me. But I'm actually working on starting a consulting company where, because so many people ask me about our business and how, so many questions about our business. And in teaching, like at NYU, like teaching, new directors, I'll go through their scripts with them and help them, break it all down. So I think there's a real, like, besides an apprenticeship program, there's a real kind of misconnect in younger people coming into this business and not getting knowledge from people that know
Mhm.
this business. I mean, this business has been around for 125 years, and it's developed a real way of working and functioning that really works. It's not to say that you can't break the mold, but there are a lot of great things that this business figured out and how to do. So being able to help, with that process, I think
Nice.
is something I want to do.
Curious about the collaboration with James Mangold. Just wondering how many specific ideas he came to the project with vis-a-vis the way it should sound and the process, or did he just sort of give you a lot of room to operate and do what you do?
So in the very beginning, he was against going live between us and you. Because of the time, because normally with a normal actor, it's going to be like one take. Oh, this didn't work well. That didn't work well. This didn't work well. The potential for the movie to run over is massive going under a way of doing it like this. So he was very much against it. He said right from the beginning, I don't want to use earpieces. I want to be able to play back, on speakers on set, and then we'll do whatever live we do live. And that all changed, obviously. Timmy ran the show, to be honest with you. Timmy determined how much. There are times when actually I would go to Jim and say, "What are we going to do here?" And he's like, "Let's wait for Timmy to come out." But
Surprised.
he was surprised. We were all surprised. We were all very pleasantly surprised. But Mangold is a very strong director who knows exactly what he wants and was very involved with my mixes. So I grew up in the analog days where you only had 2 tracks to record on. So if you were mixing 20 microphones, if you didn't open that fader at that moment, that sound wasn't going on that tape. And that was it. There was no other place that it could exist. Now, obviously, you have all the ISO tracks and all of that. But I learned to do those mixes back in those days. And what we do now is what we've actually done always is we do one mix track for dailies. So for dailies are like the work that you filmed and you put sound to it. So but if I tried to just give them all 40 tracks, it would sound like a mess. So they need to hear like the closest representation of what it might sound like. And Jim was so focused on that representation because he said that's what the studio execs hear. That's what the actors hear. That's what everybody who hears dailies, and now it's all done wireless, all done through, internet. But that's the sound that they're going to hear, and they're going to associate with this movie for 4 months until we go into post-production. So he would come over to me sometimes. He's like, just give me a little more guitar, a little bit more vocal here. He was more in tune to my mix than anybody that I've ever worked with.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Please.
I'm kind of curious, was Bob Dylan actually on set as a consultant, and what did he think of Timothy Chalamet's performance? Kind of curious. Did he be on set?
No, he wasn't on set. No, he has not rendered an opinion. No, he never talked to Timmy. Mangold met with him once and said Timmy would love to meet with you. And Bob said, well, why would I want to do that? And that was that. Maybe because he's playing you,
Actually, on
that was that.
I would recommend you to watch a 60 Minutes interview from last Sunday where you have Timothée Chalamet answering that question. And he's actually doing a good joke of if he were to meet Bob Dylan, he would probably not even mention the movie at all. Hey, what's your favorite food?
No, he probably wouldn't. He probably wouldn't. No. So I just did a Springsteen movie called Deliver Me From Nowhere that comes out in next November. And on the contrary, Bruce was there almost every single day. Literally on set almost every single day, to the point where he's like in the way, where it's like, you gotta like, excuse me.
Go see Bob.
Yeah, go see Bob. Oh, that's good. I wish I would have thought about that.
Do you think you could do an iPhone movie, or would that be too constricting?
iPhone for sound?
Well, for the whole thing.
I think it's definitely coming. There's no doubt. Again, and sound-wise, it's all about microphones. It's all about getting the microphones in the right place. For what I do, 80% of it is getting the right microphone in the right place. And what you record it on is not as important anymore. I mean, obviously the Nagra was everything, and then they tried to switch to DAT tape, and DAT tape was terrible. It was like 16-bit and that. But until they got machines that really are much better now. And now it's really hard to tell the difference between analog. I have a very hard time if I'm listening to an analog tape or a really well, digitally recorded tape. It's hard. It's different with records. It's without a doubt.
Sure.
It's different with records, but in recording voices and that, it's hard. They've gotten so good.
Todd, thank you.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thank you very much. I'm going to watch the movie on your
Yeah.
system.